Welcome to Marriage with Joy, which is the most open discussion on the internet about the positive, purposeful, powerful, pleasant aspects of living in harmony with matrimony. Marriage with Joy unabashedly discusses the most interesting questions raised by listeners. Our informed and informative panel addresses issues with thought, wit, and aplomb. Voted best of the web 2 years running. Good day, beautiful, bountiful, beloved immortal beings, and good-looking people. Maybe you're good-looking because you're always looking for and finding the good. We have found good in abundance. We are surrounded by beauty and goodness. I am honored, humbled, and pleased to be able to introduce myself, Barry Shore, as the host of this, known as the Ambassador of Joy, and joined by three of the most wonderful, interesting, smart, caring women that I've ever had the pleasure of interacting with. And it's really something special. Today's show, I think, is going to break through some boundaries and create, I hope, a lot of waves, not just ripples. I hope a lot of waves and get people thinking and talking and such. And it may be the first of several shows that we do on this particular subject. It's especially germane because we are just months away from one of the more consequential national elections in the United States of America. And it's really quite a time of upheaval, not just for the United States, but for the world. There is so much turmoil. There is war. There is the fear of recession. And that's just on the surface. And we're talking about people's lives and how it's affected by inflation and immigration and all kinds of other things. So today we're going to begin the large topic, the very large talk that of something that I just learned recently. It's called the TRAD wife. Okay, it's a saying. TRAD, of course, is short for traditional, and a traditional wife. And the way I'm understanding the definition means a wife married to a husband and raising a family where the wife has certain duties, jobs, how should we call it, areas of expertise, and the man has those. And they're entered into holy matrimony for the purpose of creating a home that nurtures the future generations. And of course, it does involve the idea of treating one another with compassion and equality, et cetera, et cetera. However, this has been something that I think, and again, ladies, you'll correct me if I'm off on this, because I'm reading about it. It's called the fourth wave of feminism or something like that. So that's a lot to put in the introduction alone, but we're going to get right to a couple of questions, and you're going to hear from them because they're smarter than me, and they're women and mothers and grandmothers and all kinds of stuff. I will say just in the opening that we're going to be talking about several people, and some of these people are apparently world famous because they have millions and millions of followers on the various social media outlets. One of them, her name is Hannah Nealman. That's her married name, and quite a fascinating person, married to a fellow named Daniel Nealman, who is himself an interesting character. But it's really about social conservatism and what that means, in the United States, and what that has to do with the rest of the world in terms of people getting married and such. I would tell you quite bluntly that I did an internal poll amongst the people that talk to us on our podcast, which is several thousands of people. And I sent out a couple of notes and emails and asked people to comment. And there were two particular questions, and they both came up very, I thought, quite interesting. Which first one was, do you think that social conservatism is real as opposed to just people are buzzing about it? Is social conservatism a movement? And the response that I got, again, just a straw poll, was a few hundred people, is that the numbers came back. You ready for this? 62-38. 62% of the respondents said, yes, there is a movement called social conservatism. Okay, interesting. And then the other question was, do you support TRAD wife? I use TRAD, I was trying to be hip. Do you support TRAD wife? And those numbers came back even more interesting. 67 said yes, 33% didn't say no, but they said not particularly. So, in our audience, at least, people who listen to Marriage with Joy, you've been sort of brainwashed because and you're choosing to tune in because we discuss this in a more traditional sense. So, you see that it does weigh towards people who are socially conservative, at least when it comes to the idea of marriage and family and such like that. I don't know what it is nationally, although I did see one poll, or maybe it was two, but at least one, where the the idea of they asked people, like I think it was 2,000 or 3,000 people responded. They asked people, "Are you socially conservative?" And the percentage that came back is, surprisingly to me at least, 38%. 38% pronounce themselves socially conservative when it comes to marriage and families, things like that. And socially liberal came back 32%. So the conservatives have it over the liberal, but they were both in the 30s. I thought that was fascinating. Neither of them rose up to the 50% plus level, the majority. Okay, that's just data for the moment. So let's begin with of course, our leadoff batter, an amazing being from the Pacific Northwest, Dr. Diane Medved, a great author of numbers of books. One of them is called Don't Divorce. And although she said she's thinking about writing a book saying, okay, forget it, I give up, go divorce. But that was maybe tongue in cheek, I don't know. And there's not a real question per se from people. I'm going to posit an idea, Diane and Maura and Lori, and thank you for all joining, and just rest eloquent on what you want to say about it. And let's just begin with the idea of, for want of a better term, social conservatism when it relates specifically to marriage. And I'd like Dr. Diane, if you'd be kind enough to begin.
Absolutely. I'm honored that you choose to let me speak first, because my colleagues are equally brilliant, and I tend to try and not usurp, but I end up taking all the good comments in the beginning. So in any case, as far as social conservatism being a movement, about 15 years ago, the company Starbucks, you know, the one with the ubiquitous stores everywhere, the company Starbucks had a program whereby they asked different people, so-called celebrities, to give them quotes that they would then print on their cups. And I was honored when they asked me to give them a quote. And the quote that I gave them, lo, those many years ago, was, no matter what your politics are, no matter what you think about current events, everyone wants to live their lives conservatively. They want children who are healthy and mentally fit. They want to have a good marriage. They want to not be in conflict with people. They want to be united with a community and have whatever values and religion and philosophy that they choose to have. But everyone, no matter what their politics, no matter what they end up doing with their life, really wants to live as a conservative. And so I got my quote on the venti cup, which I should have been less wordy, and I would have had the more popular grande cup. But in any case, the quote is relevant in that I believe that what's going on here is not a manifestation of a difference in values. Everyone wants to have a good relationship and be healthy and have a community and friendship and a philosophy. What's going on now is that social media are distorting our relationships. What we have is a place where Mrs. Needleman can go on and show her life and say, I make spaghetti this way or that way. I happen to have also checked out the original article in the Times of London by Megan Agnew. And Megan Agnew also has a video, and she explained her experience. She only spent one day with Hannah Needleman, who is she has 9 million Instagram followers. Now, why does she do that? Because like Pioneer Woman before her, who has a raft of cookbooks and was doing the exact same thing 15 years before, she's having a beautiful lifestyle. Everyone loves to live on a farm and have 8 gorgeous children or even 1 gorgeous child. Let's look at the Democrats. The Democrats picked a VP candidate, and if you saw his speech last night, what he was talking about was all the traditional values that he's lived. He was a school teacher for 24 years. He was in the National Guard for 20 years. He and his wife had difficulty having children, and that's why he named the daughter they finally were able to have Hope. These are values that don't rely on parties or rely on anything that can be defined. These are human values, and Mrs. Needleman happens to be living them. There are a lot of women and men who wish that they could have that lifestyle and maybe have an opportunity to be snarky and to write comments and to be mean. But there's millions of people who then follow her and love her. So what we see here is a manifestation of expression. People can get angry, people can express themselves, people can go back and forth and argue just because we have the social media to allow it. And I think that our country is being divided not necessarily by underlying values, but more by the opportunity to fight about it and the opportunity to assert differences that maybe before people would not have expressed. And so I think Mrs. Needleman should have a wonderful life with her husband. By the way, Megan Agnew asked her as she was on her one day with her, is this the life that you always dreamed of? Is this the life that you wanted? And it turns out that Mrs. Needleman told her that, no, actually, I wanted to always live in New York City. And I was training to be, and my dream in life is to be a ballerina. Well, she had gone to Juilliard and she could have become a ballerina. And she got sort of steered off that path into something different. It isn't even the dream life of Hannah Needleman. So everyone has fantasies. Everyone has what they want, what they don't want. And these things change all the time. People never remain the same throughout their lives. You have a new relationship and that person changes your opinion. I think it's a matter of just turning up the volume too loud so that we end up questioning ourselves and fighting with each other needlessly. And my advice would be stay off of social media. Don't look at Hannah. Don't look at Agnew. Don't look at any of them. Lead your life in actual real time, doing good things for the people around you, loving the people who you should be loving, and don't worry about the rest.
Shower the people you love with love. That was James Taylor. Okay. Anyway, first of all, thank you, Diane. She was on the soapbox, and I love it. 3 points. May I? Number one, the fact that you got your quote on any kind of cup and that people, through Starbucks, that's a wonderful thing. And it was specifically in this idea of being conservative, because conservative is the natural human condition. I do want to share my life with somebody I love and build something that's beyond me. I'm using that as a definition. The second thing is, and it's so relevant, and we'll have another show about this, about the social media, let's give it the real name, anti-social media, tearing at the very fabric of the human condition, which is community, unity as the operative word, and creating, like you say, snarkiness and poking and tearing apart rather than building up. And it happens to be that Hannah, the one-time aspiring ballerina, courted by the a billionaire's son and whisking her away to a farm, 300 plus acre farm in Utah. And okay, it used to be sort of a fairy tale story, which is great, and it is. And she has not just 9 million followers on one of the, but if you add all her followers together, it's 18 million. Okay, it's a number. It's a good number. The important point that I want to emphasize that you did at the end, and it's really critical, I said we'll have a whole show about this, is a book now. It's becoming a movement by a man named Jonathan Haidt. He doesn't like to be called Haidt, by the way. It's Hyatt or something, Haidt. And I think we mentioned in our last show, just in passing, keep kids away from social media until the age of 16. Just keep them away. Don't even give them a phone. We discussed it last time a little bit, and we'll go deeper. But it's a powerful tool that is very difficult to wield unless you have some control. One of the great things I find about Hannah, having been trained as a ballerina, one of the great aspects of that is you're trained to be disciplined. See, if you're going to have a family, and she happens to have, not happen, they have 8 children. Let's be blunt. 8 kids that ain't, and that's not chump change. That's a lot of stuff. Now, I got to tell everybody off the record, but it's on the record, Diane is blessed to have a great teacher in Jerusalem who he and his wife have 19 children. One marriage, emphasize again, not many wives, one wife, right? It's a big gig. Discipline is it's an essential aspect of life. So the fact that she was trained as a ballerina gave her, I believe, the wherewithal to enter into a shift in whatever she was thinking about and be able to apply the same kind of methodical ability to succeed. Because without it, how are you going to have a family with a husband and 8 kids and run a farm and have social media? Okay, it's superhuman. One of them, Maura, down in the great Southwest in Florida, right by the Tampa Bay, having just seen a hurricane outside her window 2 days ago. I love that idea. We were talking before the show. Hey, I just looking out my window because I see Tampa Bay, and there's a hurricane out there with the waves up, 18 feet high, choppy water. Okay, not 18, exaggeration, but it was a hurricane. Okay, so speaking of hurricanes and churning things up, what's your take on this TRAD wife process that seems to be, I wouldn't call it a trend yet, but it's certainly something that's waking up, especially younger women. And that's really important because we've talked a lot about younger women not having anything to do with marriage. So your take on all this, Maura.
Well, first, I want to thank you, Barry, for even telling us in advance what we were going to talk about today, because I had not heard of Hannah Nealman until you said study up. So I was thrilled to learn about her. And then secondly, to hear both sides of the story. Diane made a very good point when she was talking about the pioneer woman. For every age and era, we see archetypes or personalities that will promote a certain lifestyle or message. I thought this girl's lifestyle, now it wouldn't be my choosing. I need to be around people. I'm more the cosmopolitan. I need to go downtown, see people. But I thought it was absolutely beautiful, refreshing, inspirational, creative, communal with her family. And I'll tell you something else that I thought was, these are the positives that I picked out of that. Originally, when I heard the name Nealman, even though of the spelling, I thought, oh, she might be a Jewish girl. I didn't realize she was Mormon. And most of us, because of, I would say, what is in our minds, we have a certain picture of what Mormon women are like. And I know what created a lot of this controversy was that she has no rights. Basically, her husband controls everything. And frankly, if I was expecting a trip to, what was the story, to Greece, and instead I got an apron, I think I wouldn't be too happy. But I will have to say, I know a number of women who are Mormon, and she was a good picture of them. But I know a number of women, they're super women. They not only have multiple children, but many of them very successful businesswomen in their own right. So what I saw in that was such a lot of positive energy. I also saw it as a unique expression of what two people created out of their marriage, and how they're extending a lifestyle and a life and a legacy with 8 children. I'm thinking that's something to be very proud about, very grateful for. You're building. The other thing too, Barry, you just mentioned about anti-social media, and you're right. When we were growing up, our parents used to talk about the boob tube. Keep the kids away from that TV. It's no good. And when it was originally created, the patent for it, it was actually known, a friend pointed this out to me recently, as the mind control machine. Now imagine that on steroids today with social media. Most people today are very easily led astray. And I think the way I look at all these things, this woman or not, socially conservative or not, when we learn to go within and decide the values that are important to us, that make us feel peaceful, happy, joyous, hopeful, loved, we're safe, in a place where we can trust those around ourselves, and we extend that, we are really creating very beautiful lives and legacies. And also we're creating, I could add one more thing about this woman. I don't even know, this is like a PS. You're right. That woman going to Juilliard to become a ballerina, that is a discipline unlike very few in this world. So she took a skill set that she was applying toward a future career and identity and just moved it over and is now employing it with children. I could not personally see myself giving birth to 8 kids and then working on the farm and trying to look beautiful and running social media and selling products. But what a wonderful, positive picture to present in the public, I want to say in the public arena, to say, you know what, there is something that does work well when two people love each other, they're committed to each other, they all work together, and they're building something not only today but for the future. It left me overall with a very positive feeling. Even though I may not be that woman or ever look like that woman, we need more of it because it gives people almost an antidote to some of the anti-social media influences, where people, rather than finding out what's important to them, have an opportunity externally to see some positive things to follow, or to at least emulate or consider.
Maura, you are a fountain of goodness. You live in a fog. Fountain of goodness. So, you mentioned the boob tube, and those, when I was growing up, it was still called the boob tube, and we loved it. And then there was a famous book, Marshall McLuhan said, "The medium is the message." So even back then, in the benighted 20th century, in the last few decades, there was always the concern about mind control and how one does it. So it's certainly more diffused than it used to be, because then it was 3 stations and that's all you had access to. The interesting part that you bring up here about that you never heard of Hannah prior to this, or Ballerina Farm, I'd be willing to bet a little dollar to a donut. Well, actually, donuts are more valuable than a dollar these days. The other way around, that your daughter knows who Hannah is. So ask you, after we get off, ask your daughter if she knows who Hannah Nealman or Ballerina Farm, if she knows.
I will. And I'll tell you, if I could give another PPS to that, our daughter and son-in-law up in Maine they have Belfort farms that they're trying to grow their own food. So I'm going to ask her. I will find out.
Right. So you just hit upon something very wondrous here. Again, I'm 75 chronologically, so I've experienced some quite remarkable things in the decades that have been around, and I was very deeply involved in what other people call the hippie movement. I was, I had hair down to I used to have hair, black hair down to my shoulders, and it was wonderful, sweet flowing. I traveled throughout America visiting numbers of communes and such like that. And this movement that you see today with the ballerina farm, somewhat reminiscent, except for one thing. In those days, even though people were committed, it wasn't a commitment of, like you said beautifully, living and legacy, of having families and such. It was more about free love and expression, and maybe it was the first wave of feminism. Removing the bra, the what do you call it, the restraints, and going around. Yes, people lived on the land. It was more of in your eye, against the man type of stuff, distinct from what they're doing now, which is growing your own food and doing things in the most positive, purposeful, powerful, pleasant way. So it's wonderful to see, though, these movements, these shifts. You can almost experience it. It's really something. But I love the positive energy. Now, we have with us down here in Southern California, just returning from the Emerald Isle. Right? Is that right, Lori?
Yeah, Ireland, yes.
Yeah, that's the Emerald Isle, right? Just returning from the Emerald Isle. Speaking of that, I just met a wonderful woman named Kathy Ireland. Everybody remember Kathy Ireland?
Model. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just met, we were at a conference together, and I'm hopefully going to be interviewing her on my other podcasts and such.
Oh,
so I was thinking Ireland. Okay.
Yes. Girl. Very pretty girl.
Supermodel, and again, wonderful being, married for 29 years, 3 children, supermodel, an empire like a Martha Stewart type of thing. To go to your point, Diane, that you started, it's the conservative anchor in all of us, isn't it? Politics aside, it's that which animates the being. So, Lori, welcome back from Ireland. I trust the trip was delightful and uneventful, other than it was just a lot of fun. And so tell us now what your thoughts about, because you're dealing with a number of women who are in the throes of difficulty and turmoil and divorce, maybe because they didn't have the TRAD marriage, traditional situation. So your opinion and thoughts, please, about TRAD wife or TRAD marriage, etc.
First of all, I personally was one. And it wasn't because I decided on it. We just kind of had this conversation where I wanted my kids to be raised with me or him. One of us had to stay home. And since I was doing stand-up, I could do that at night. And when he would come home for the day, I could go out and work. So I talked about being a stay-at-home mom. That was my act. And if I did that act today, no one would find it funny, because even like 20 years ago, that stay-at-home mom jokes were funny. Today, it's more questionable because people really don't know what that is. Now it's traditional wives. And here's how I feel about it. If you want to raise chickens in your house instead of keeping them in the backyard, or you want to have 20 cats in your house, or if you want to have 20 kids in your house and stay home with them instead of getting a babysitter and having a full-time job, that's up to you. It should be no one else's business. But we've decided that it's our place to make judgment about how other people are living. And I personally don't like that. As long as nobody's getting murdered or abused, we're doing okay. And as far as that woman having 8 kids and being able to cook for them and clean for them and farm, I mean, I have trouble doing one of those things during my day, get alone, all of those with all those people. I have 3 kids. It's been hard. When I was even home with them, it was hard. There's homework and there's all these little details you forget. And every one of them needs to know that you love them and have that one-on-one attention, or they get lost in the crowd, because it is a crowd. 8 kids is a crowd. And, then they fight and they kind of grow up with each other, helping them grow. Like everyone has answers for each other, how to teach each other how to try their shoes. They're asking each other and working together. So the older kids kind of take on the role of being mom. So in her case, I think it's wonderful. In my case, I was a stay-at-home mom until I had to go to work. And then I did stand up. And then from there, I became what I do today, which I didn't really want to do this either. This is just what fell into my lap. And so maybe she really wants to be a ballerina. But here's the funny thing. If anyone's out there saying, he's controlling her life, she's just a peon. He's doing everything for her. He's talking for her. I read that article. His farm is called Ballerina. Yeah, think any man would want to call his farm Ballerina? I don't think so. Yeah, I applaud her. And I wish we would just let people live their lives and just applaud them. But people don't want to do that. They want to create drama and trauma out of nothing. And if anyone wants to be a stay-at-home mom, we need that. I think kids grow up to be stronger humans when they have someone who really cares about them. I live in a nanny land, right? I got people here having kids and not working, not even having a job and having a nanny. And, you know, those nannies, they're on their phone, hanging out with the kid who's at the park, and the nanny's not even talking to them. And that kid is sitting there playing in the sand by itself, herself, they self. And I don't think that's good. I'd rather the mom be there interacting or not interacting with the kid. And I think we're losing that. And if there's women who think that it's their job to stay home with their kid to raise them, I'm grateful. I think we'll have a better culture if we do that.
Very strong. Thank you. Another question. When you were in Ireland for 2 weeks?
Yeah. Oh, and just, you asked about my wives. So a lot of the people that come to me for help when their marriage splits, like about half of them have been stay-at-home moms, have never had a job. And now their husband is gone and he's taken all the money with him. They don't have income coming in and they don't have anything to rely on, no skills. And so I coach them through that and remind them they do have skills. And you can intertwine all those things about being a stay-at-home mom and put it on a resume and make you look like you're brilliant. And that's what I help people do and give them the confidence for that, because that's still there. What was your question, Barry?
So in Ireland, I don't know if you had time to interact with people or you were a tourist, so therefore you didn't have any interactions. But Ireland, until very recently, was a very traditional, family-oriented country. It was last year, though, that the parliament overwhelmingly approved abortion on demand, which is a very big shift because it's a very Catholic country. But did you experience families and such, or were you mostly a tourist, so you didn't really get to be with people?
I have family there still. So
Okay.
my grandma was one of 13, and they still have the plot of land, 77 acres, that her house was on. It was like this, 600 square foot house that lived like 11 people. So the census said in 1911. So I got to see all that. I got to see the farm. And my cousin, who now has the farm and still kept the old house, but they built a house next to it, her uncle gifted her the land because she was getting married and he wanted her to have the land for free. But they were building this house and she was going to build it on the road that dead ended into the house. And her uncle kept going, oh, you can do whatever you want. Total family. You can do whatever you want. And when she said, I'm going to move the house in the middle of the road because the road behind it has been closed, he said, absolutely not. You cannot do that. Absolutely not. Where will the fairies go? The fairies have their community they find on the road. You can't put a house in their way. And it's like, really? And she's like, yes, we had to put the house over there. So yeah, there's a lot of family. There's a lot of tradition. There's a lot of culture. It's an incredible place. And you see it. Whole families are out there with all their kids, and then they know who was there and who moved to Ireland over there in the northern, and it's just it's a magical place, Ireland.
So this touches exactly on what Diane began with, and Maura emphasized. Is this? We certainly, I think everybody agrees, at least the four of us agree, that our country, our culture called America, we need more of this. We need more of the family traditions and knowledge of cousins and uncles and aunts, wherever they are in the world. For instance, Diane's had Michael's brothers in different parts of the world. Myself with my wife in different parts of the world and such. But it not just but. And see that, Lori? Yes, and
Nice.
I've been training myself for the past couple of years because of you. Thank you. It is absolutely fundamental to building relationships with other human beings. Remember, the name of our podcast is what? Marriage with Joy. And the essence of joy is making sure that there are relationships with other people. Because without that, you shrivel. The human being can't grow unless there's an interaction with other beings and listening and seeing someone's quote and either agreeing or not agreeing, but being in a coffee house. I mean, again, when I was in my hippie days, so we traveled a lot throughout America, and even I spent 3 years overseas in a place called Amsterdam, which was the capital of the world for people traveling all over. And to be in coffee houses when there was no Starbucks. Can you imagine a world without Starbucks? Anyway, real coffee houses in Europe or in America, but mostly in Europe. And being in a coffee house where people, 20 different languages, and yet English was still the dominant language, and people discussing, sometimes arguing. Nobody threw anything, and yet arguments were done in a way of almost to the point of, I love you. Okay, you're an idiot. You know what you're talking about. However, I do love you. Those were the arguments. Contrast that to what I think Diane was bringing up and what happens on anti-social media is that, first of all, you're wrong. You are an idiot. I hate you. And the hate begins to rise. See, one of the things that I've found personally in traditional marriage, and my wife is a traditional wife. What's a different, I guess, a definition, because she was going to be a ballerina and she chose not to. Actually not, but she was a Thai dancer. My wife is quite elegant, right, Diane? And she's quite remarkable. She was raised in fancy boarding schools in Thailand and such. And then she says to me, now I end up cooking for you. Hello. Okay, she says it tongue in cheek. The point is, though, she loves the fact of being married. She loves the fact of raising. We had blessed with only one son, one child, but raising, and now we have 2 grandsons staying with us at this very moment for a month, and it's wonderful. And being the kunyai is Thai for grandmother. The traditional wife process, the traditional marriage process, is so oriented towards what you mentioned, Diane and Lori and Maura, community building, feeling that I belong. Knowing that even in a house where there was 3 kids, 8 kids, more, that, okay, I know I'm loved. And so my brother and my sister are loved also. So it doesn't detract. Isn't that amazing, by the way? You can love another person without detracting. It's like the famous, light the candle and many candles are lit from it. It doesn't detract. The one brother doesn't feel, you don't love me because I didn't get 14 minutes of your time and he did. I was counting. Okay, that tends not to happen. I will tell you, I'm quite touched in a very heartbroken way when you said something, Lori, about that you live in nanny land. It's I think, a very difficult place to be. Nanny land means she's in Southern California. Oftentimes, wealthier households, women have a child or 2, maybe 3, but not usually, oh my gosh, with a nanny. And the nanny is tasked with all the things that wife doesn't want to do or can't do or thinks she can't do, like going to the park and playing with the kids on the swings and such like that. And you're right. The nanny is only getting an hourly wage. Why should the nanny pay any attention to the kid other than the fact of, okay, you hurt yourself, I'll pick you up, I'll clean you up. But in terms of being attached to a phone, and it's even more of a difficulty because oftentimes nannies don't speak the same language. I mean, literally don't speak the same language. And instead of enabling a child to learn another language, which would be pretty cool, right? Whether it's Spanish or Tagalog or just any other language. No, what happens is the nanny regresses and goes into the social media of their own culture and gets immersed. And the kid is just, okay, that's there. I have to take care of it when necessary. So that doesn't create a love bond. And that's really a difficulty. So now we'll go back to our ballerina farm situation. And I do have to point out something here, and it's really important, only because, again, I interact with a lot of people that send in notes to us about our marriage with joy, and money is a common question. People struggle with money, being very blunt. You mentioned it, Lori, but people get divorced. Now, I'm amazed because you're in Southern California. I thought the women gets all the rights and the men don't get, but who knows what happens. And okay, you're saying, no, it's not. But the point is that Mr. Nealman is the scion, the son of the founder of JetBlue. So Mr. Nealman, the young son, pursuing the young ballerina. Again, if you wrote this, the story in 1950, it would be a romantic novel, right? Pursuing the young ballerina and whisking her away and saying, come to us, set up a farm in, my home country of Utah or whatever it is. So he's a billionaire's son. So money was not the issue. Children became the issue, and they are the issue, but they had sufficient funding to be able to make all that work, not to take away a whit from them of what it is they're doing, because they made a decision, and this is something I did some research on. They made a decision to show themselves to the world in this positive, purposeful, powerful, pleasant light, precisely to say, you can have a remarkable, interesting, fascinating life with a husband or wife, children, occupation, and things that seem to be from Leave It to Beaver times and not possible anymore, like baking cookies together. By the way, I think it was either the last show we did or the one before, we had on this interesting fellow, Mark Harris. He and his wife are married, 30 years, and they have 13 kids. So this exists, not in a vacuum. And as I said, I think it's extremely important in light of what's happening at this very moment in time. We're at August the 7th in the year 2024. In 90 days, plus minus, actually less than 90 plus days, there'll be a president of the United States and a vice president. And the choice is quite stark. No matter what you think about this person named Trump, viscerally, love him, hate him, that's beside the point. There are policies that one of these two candidates are espousing that tend towards the conservative, traditional situation, and another that tends towards a different vision of America and life. And it's a stark choice. What's going to happen? We'll find out.
We may disagree on which candidate you're talking about.
Which candidate is traditional? So, by the way,
you remember my original point is.
Yeah, so I was going to say, I listened intently yesterday, Diane. I'm glad you brought this up. And if I didn't know any better, and I don't, because I didn't know the man before, I was applauding. This is great. He brought out all the things, and he said, by the way, we won the state championship in football. He was a football coach. They checked all the boxes that would say, I am a traditional American, and my wife is as well. And by the way, only because I'm crazy with these things, it was sort of like hearkening back to Bill Clinton. You remember one of Bill Clinton's taglines when he was running for president? They called him the man from Hope. Even though he wasn't from Hope, Arkansas, didn't matter. He'd been sort of like Joe Biden. He passed through, for a couple of years. So the man from Hope. And now I think one of the reasons, now they have our daughter Hope. So it's great. You're right. On the CV, the resume, it looks the same. And that's great, by the way. That is really important. As long as everybody espouses the idea that we really not just want, we in the United States of America, we need as much traditional values as possible, because the world is in turmoil, isn't it? And we are the leader of the free world, not even the free world. We're the leader of the world. And people look to America. So we have only a few minutes left. Diane, would you like to say something in about 2 minutes? We'll go around. And then I think with your permission, we'll even extend this idea to next time. You have a 2-minute closing argument, Diane?
It's not an argument. I think my Starbucks cup says it all, that everyone holds for themselves. They want to live a traditionally conservative life. They don't want to have trauma. They don't want to be on the fringe. They don't want to be the one that has multiple divorces. They don't want to have kids who are having problems. When it gets down to it, people want stability and love and consistency and caring and community. And I don't think that that is a political difference. I think people that support either party at root want those things. And so I think it's a mistake to divide people and suggest that one side has a monopoly or lacks a monopoly on these values. Also, women nowadays are in a different position. That's why they call it the fifth wave of feminism, the first being the suffragettes. Now it is necessary for most women to bring in an income. And so they are often put in a position of having to balance their careers. Unlike Mrs. Nealman, who is not in that position, she's able to have the luxury of staying home with her children or raising her 8 children herself. But I know many, many people who don't have that luxury. And also, while they may want to have stayed home, they also want to have the fulfillment of their careers and what their careers brings them as an individual. One should not necessarily submit yourself to other values and submit yourself to serving other people only. Certainly, that should be a major factor, and you should look to serving others before yourself. But that doesn't mean that you negate the ability to express yourself through your career. And so I think a lot of this negativity that's going back and forth is maybe self-evaluation of people who then express that against someone else. And we should, again, I would keep emphasizing, we should try and withdraw from all the negativity and infuse our lives with positivity and giving and caring.
Thank you. Maura, you have a 2-minute closing argument?
Okay. You brought out an interesting point. This is like a side note, Barry, when you said today, and this is true, many women cannot afford to be at home with their children, stay at home with their children. Last time I was up visiting our daughter and son-in-law, we were also with another young couple. Both couples have yet to have children, but this was the discussion. Now, this is up in Maine, so we're not talking about New York City, LA, and they had both shared that if you have today 2 children, you are paying, and this is just 9 to 5, 8 to 5, 8 to 6 childcare, about $2,000 per month. Meaning, if a mother has to work and she wants 2 children, her first $2,000 goes just to paying for somebody else to raise those children. I think where we are today, we're always at society's always evolving. And yet there's always that core that people like going back to because it makes you feel good. It makes you feel hopeful. It makes you feel strong. Is that we need to almost find some new and innovative ways to make our futures brighter. And one of the things I've said to our daughter, she works for a company way out in the Seattle area. And sometimes things are very quiet for her. And sometimes she has forced days off. So she's got some other things going on. And I said to her, Kaylee, during my era, when I had a career before I had her, I said, I was gone from prior to sunrise to after sunset with corporate management responsibilities. I said, I didn't have the flexibility you have today. And I think that if nothing less, if nothing more, because we started with this whole thing about the TRAD wife or the TRAD bride and a traditional type of family, there can be the thought, the imaginations, and the creativity to get some of those things that really matter to us, like being there, being present as the main person in our children's lives and in our family life. And even as I was listening to you, Lori, I was so totally focused on my career. But when I had our daughter, I remember thinking of this. I could never be as excellent out there and being a mom. But the second thing is that I wanted to be the main influence over my daughter's life, over her value systems. Now, today, not everybody has every option, but what I would say, and as a hopeful message, use whatever you have, use whatever resources you have. Think about those values that are most important to you and say, well, maybe I can't do the ideal, but what is it that I can inject? And what freedoms and what arenas do I have to bring the things from my heart, my value system, and make them work in my marriage and my life?
Thank you, Maura. Lori, you have 2 minutes closing arguments.
I have people in my life now who are traditional wives, and they have made sacrifices. I know one family only has one car, and she has an electric bike, which cost her $2,000. She doesn't have to pay insurance on it, and she's got a basket for the kids. So they make shifts. They make sacrifices because we live near the beach. You don't need to go too far. It's kind of a bubble, and you work. You figure out. It all comes down to what you want. Like, I want this. I know people that do homeschooling because it keeps the kids home. They drive them all over all the time as a stay-at-home mom. And, I always said if I homeschooled, I couldn't do it because if there was ever a school shooting, one of us would go to jail, and I didn't want to go to jail. So, thank you. So the point is, though, everybody gets to choose their own path. And when I hear someone say, I really want to be a stay-at-home mom and I can't afford it, it's like, but you're going to spend $2,000 a month on childcare. And here it's more, it's almost like $2,500. And you're going to spend all that on childcare just to go work. And some women say, yeah, I can't be home with my kids. I will go crazy. I have to work, even if I pay extra to have someone else watch my kids. But that's her choice. The greatest thing about America is we're free to live our life and choose for what we want. And that's what I hope for people. But I don't like when I hear someone say, I want this, but I can't have it. You can. You just have to think outside the box, right? And I help women do that because you can get you want to be home, we'll figure it out. You want to go back to work, we'll figure it out. There's always a way. Never give up.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, which are amongst life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So each one of you has contributed tremendously to this, and it's really critical to that your voices are being heard. And I'll leave everybody with what I talk about oftentimes when I do both webinars, even in person. I urge people to internalize, utilize, and leverage the 6 most important words you'll ever learn, which are choice, not chance, determines your destiny. How you choose to respond to any given situation will determine the path of your life and your trajectory. So as you said, Lori, if you want this, strategize. It's a world today of options. You said it nicely, Diane. If you want to be home and work, okay, figure it out. Because today, unlike any other time in history, by the way, I believe, there are so many opportunities. It takes thought, it takes work, it takes discipline, but guess what will happen? It will happen. That which you want to have happen will happen. You visualize it. That's how all the great sports people win. So we're urging people to become winners. That's what we're doing here, right? So again, I am deeply indebted to you for making your time to be here today. Wonderful Dr. Diane Medved, Maura Sweeney, and Lori McDermott, and your humble host, Barry Shore. And for everybody listening, and there are thousands of people who just love listening to you. I'm telling you, it is a joy and a delight. So you should take great solace in all of that. And Diane, do you have one of your cups? I hope you have one of your cups in the house.
I do. I'll show you next week.
Next time.
A friend of ours made it into a display that we have up on the wall. So
okay. Very good. Very good. Okay. So as we traditionally do, we do two things. We're going to do a hug and we'll do a blessing as we go out. So this is, I guess, yeah, this is August. So this is going to be the last show of the summer, right? And next time will be probably Labor Day. Around that time, it'll be end of summer. People going back to school already. There's all kinds of things happening. So it's time for thoughts, reflections, prayer, and all kinds of good things. So on the count of three, remember, HUG stands for heartfelt, unlimited giving, which is what you all do. And I'm very honored and proud to be with you today. 1, 2, 3. And our lesson from Dr. Diane and Laura and Lori and Barry is go forth, live exuberantly, spread the seeds of joy, happiness, peace, and love. Go mad. Go make a difference. Welcome to Marriage with Joy, which is the most open discussion on the internet about the positive, purposeful, powerful, pleasant aspects of living in harmony with matrimony. Marriage with Joy unabashedly discusses the most interesting questions raised by listeners. Our informed and informative panel addresses issues with thought, wit, and aplomb. Voted best of the web 2 years running.